of the season. You guys have all survived. I want to thank you all very much for all of your support. I want to take a minute to specifically say thank you to Margaret Clark and Janet Harrison, who have provided all your goodies for you. 3 months, every Tuesday. That's a lot of work. So that's a big part of what gets people coming back. But people behind the scenes or in front of the scenes have done a lot of work to make sure things run smoothly. Robert Harrison and David Clark. For the guy that's seldom seen, he's very quiet. In the back of the room, we have Jay Eggert, who's providing our video for the first time. This is a new thing. Now you can go online if you miss a lecture and see it online. So that's a big deal. Thank you very much, Jay. There are a few other people I'd like to recognize, probably the most important people. Please stand up if you were one of the presenters of one of our lectures. Without them and their expertise, we would be in real trouble. And my personal thanks to all of the mentors who volunteered their time and effort to bring our trainees along to a successful conclusion. So this isn't done by any one person. It's a group effort, and because we have such a great docent cadre, we're able to do this and be proud of that. Okay.
And let's have some applause for our training officer.
Now, some of our trainees have distinguished themselves. I think Margaret can introduce them.
Okay. Where is Haley? Haley Chaitin. There she is. Haley Barron. Haley Barron. Haley had some good news this week. She's been offered a job as crew on the Lynx, which is currently in Georgia. This is a paid job. Oh, it's gone. Oh, there it is. We are very happy for her, and it's a wonderful opportunity for her. The bad news is, here today, she's been at almost all the lectures. She won't be here next week because she's leaving for Georgia tomorrow. So, she sent me an email on Saturday, late afternoon, early evening, and said, is there any way I can finish up before I leave? This was Saturday, wasn't it? So yesterday, Monday morning, she and I met here on this deck of Berkeley, and she finished her breakfast and wrote her exam. Yeah, she wrote her exam, finishing her breakfast, and she got up from writing the exam and went straight into giving her final walkthrough tour with me, and she passed both of them. So, well done, Haley.
So how many of you have actually completed your shadow tours? Yeah! How many of you completed doing your walkthrough? Trent? John? My eyesight, it takes a while to travel that
Sally.
far. Allie?
Today.
Oh. Bob? Okay. You guys are on track. The rest of you, just keep at it and keep us informed of what assistance you need to bring you over the finish line. Next Saturday, Margaret Clark will be proctoring the exam at 9 a.m. I'm sorry, next Tuesday. Okay. Yeah, next Tuesday. And of course, there will be makeup exams, so don't sweat it. If 70%, is passing. If you're at 69, we'll reschedule. We'll get you through. No sweat. The object is to get you all. Okay. We have raise your hand or stand up. Who's going to run tours this Saturday for walkthroughs? There's somebody. Oh, Rich Wolf, I guess, is not here.
Yeah.
Rich Wolf will be running a walkthrough tour 9:30 a.m., so be here at 9, Fipps Shadow Tour. 9:15 here on the upper deck of the Berkeley. So there's still people giving those walkthroughs if you haven't finished yet. So just keep at it, keep us informed, and we'll help move you across the line. Okay, any questions beyond that?
Any interest in anybody doing one on Sunday? I can do one on Sunday.
Absolutely. John, what time?
Noon,
Where?
12:15, right here, where we're sitting right now.
12:15,
Yep, right here.
right here, Sunday. If you haven't finished your shadow tours, we've got volunteers still giving their time to help you do that. So use that. Sir?
They're gonna be coffee Tuesday.
No. Oh, there will be.
What I usually do is I make coffee. I'll be here at 8:30. I will make the coffee. I will bring some banana bread. That's all. When you arrive, you get your exam, you get in, you get out, okay? And for those who have asked, the fastest people usually take about an hour, but most people take between an hour and 2 hours, some people even longer. I will wait until you're ready to turn your paper in. So, there you go.
Nancy?
Well, I have everybody here. John Layton, where's John?
John, raise your hand.
He passed his final walkthrough on Friday.
Very good.
Hey, good job, man. So John been a sail crew for how many years?
Yes, yeah, you have an advantage.
Long time.
We do have a tour tomorrow. Mr. Mike Kay will be leading around I hate this, 4 people. It starts at 10:30, so be here by 10. If you have not shadowed with Mike Kay and you'd like to, I have that opportunity.
10:30, what time?
10:30 the tour starts.
Okay.
There's one Friday too.
And there's one Friday.
Yes?
Any helpful hints on what's on this test?
Whatever they talk about.
This, the manual thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fair game.
This has been a great trainee class. Been doing this for a while. You guys have really been fun to work with. Thank you very much. Okay, our speakers today is Dr. Christina Brophy, CEO and President of the museum. And she's obviously just still kind of getting her feet on the ground. She's been here a month and a half, 3 months, time flies. And she's going to give us a little bit of her vision for the museum and on into the future, which is a great, you're very lucky to have this opportunity. So Dr. Brophy.
Well, good morning, everybody. What if I can slide this back a tiny bit so I can see it while I'm talking to you? Is that okay? Yeah. Is that okay? Great. Well, hi. Hi. I apologize in advance that I was just traveling and I have some wild jet lag, so I might not remember what I tell you. But also, I did also pick up a bit of a cold, which I'm pretty much over, but I sound like a frog. So I will try to make myself well understood. So it's so great that you guys have all come here and devoted so much of your time to bring this museum into a new stage of docent training and a new class of docents. So we really appreciate your taking the time. And I will say this probably several times during this talk, but your input, your volunteerism, your engagement with the public is our front line, and you are one of our most important assets at the museum. So when you pass your exam, I really hope to see your faces here all the time, as much as you can possibly give us, because we are really a museum run not only with a fabulous core of staff, but we also heavily rely on our volunteers to help us bring our stories to the public. So I hope to see you all often, schedule yourselves frequently, and thank you so much for taking time for this amazing course. I have not been able to be here as much as I was hoping, because I have only been here physically for 2 months and technically working here for 3, but just starting to kind of, well, I can't even say that really. sort of getting myself treading water at this point, but there's so much to learn. So I will be watching all of the tapes. I'm so grateful that these were tapes so I can go through and listen to the lectures at a later time. So I wanted to kind of just give you a little bit of insight of who I am and where I come from, because a lot of the things that I've worked on in the past are why I was hired to come here, and also why I find this particular museum so incredibly compelling and really exciting to bring into her next chapter. So this is a quote from one of the great historians and fictional characters of all time, but my favorite, Jack Sparrow. So bring me that horizon. I actually saw them on the airplane again for the millionth time the other day. But so one of the essential questions that I ask myself in all the past museums that I have worked in, and particularly with the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and then also at Mystic Seaport Museum, and now here, is what does maritime actually mean? I have colleagues in Australia who actually changed the name of their museum because they did a survey and realized that half their visitors don't know what that word means. So they changed themselves to the Museum of the Sea. Not planning on doing that, just FYI, but it does mean that there's a disconnect with the public that we really need to figure out what they're thinking when they think about maritime. Does anyone recognize this painting? Yes. It's the fog warning, actually. But it's a quintessential maritime image by one of the greatest American painters, in my opinion, of all time. And any of you guys are familiar with the Blackburn story? If you don't know that story, you have to get the book. It is one of the greatest survival stories of all time, about a man named Blackburn who was out on a dory like this with a fishing buddy, and his mothership was quite far away. They got lost in the fog. His companion ended up freezing to death and dying overnight. Blackburn, who was probably one of the hardiest men of all time, managed to row himself back to shore over many days at sea. His hands were so cold, he purposefully froze them to the oars so that he wouldn't lose the grip, and lost all of his fingers as well. But he ended up crossing the Atlantic by himself in a vessel with no fingers. Just one thumb, as I believe, and then he financed the trip by opening a pub in Gloucester, and became wildly popular. His story was popular, and Homer painted this right after his story came out, so I'm sure it was greatly inspired by that real-life adventure story. But point being, is this is what most people think about when they think about what a mariner looks like. This is maritime. It's some older gentleman out at sea, fighting the elements, fishing for his food and his industry. So what I try to engage the public to think about is, what does maritime mean to you? What does a mariner look like to you? So, and no offense to anyone with a beard in the room, but I often say to young students at Mystic Seaport and New Bedford that if I want to be a mariner, it doesn't mean that I have to grow a beard and buy a lobster boat. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But it helps. So let's expand what we think about when we think about maritime. This is my buddy Susie Flores, who was a marketing director in New York City, quit everything and opened an aqua farm in Stonington, Connecticut. She's a huge advocate for aqua farming in New England. We have this in, these are all related on all coasts around the world, so even these relationships on the east are certainly applicable here. She's a mariner, and she didn't actually know how to drive a boat until she was in her 30s. A highly successful business and an amazing person. This is a gentleman from a group called Ideal Fish, which is a land-based aquaculture farming place in Stonington, Connecticut. Does he count as a mariner? He doesn't go anywhere near the ocean, neither do his fish, and neither does the water. However, he's producing an aquatic product. Jaya Robotics, this is a little robotics company that's now becoming quite large. It's a startup out of Boston and Rhode Island. They totally consider themselves part of the maritime industry. This is a photograph by a mariner on a vessel in the Red Sea who's putting up wire for pirates to try to protect the vessel. And this was taken by somebody a couple of years ago. So when we think about pirates, I often really think about real-time pirates in modern day. But this guy's a mariner, and he probably has had very little or no training in anything to do with what we would typically consider. Ocean AI and blue tech, this is all around us in San Diego. So this is not only ways for us to rethink about how we frame the stories around about maritime history, but also what does it mean to our youth coming into these museums and thinking about, if I want to be a mariner, what can I do? I can be in robotics, I can be a chef, I can be an aqua farmer, I can do all of these different industries without having to necessarily grow a beard by a lobster boat. This is a really intriguing picture to me. I'll talk about the America's Cup as well, but these are cyclists on the team for the America's Cup from New Zealand. They are not sailors. These are just guys with strong legs. And that is a really unusual way for the America's Cup to now be positioning itself. But it's not new. When the America's Cup was here in '95, there was a woman gladiator on the women's team who'd never been on a boat in her life, and she was deaf. But she was the strongest woman I've ever met in my life, and she was one of the grinders on the boat. She didn't really need to know how to sail, they just needed the muscle. And is this a mariner? I think so, and so do most surfers. So this is a wonderful, actually an exhibition at Mystic we were doing on surfing, where that came from. And so why do maritime museums matter? And how do we provide value to the public? Sorry, I keep losing this microphone. But this is a wasp, which some of you guys are probably familiar with. These are wildly popular all over the world, and a totally different type of maritime experience than what we typically see in a maritime museum. So why maritime museums matter, and why I've managed to develop a lot of partnerships with really interesting organizations over the last 10 or so years, is because museums are storytellers. You have it right there on the side, tell me a story. And that is where we need you the most, is to be our storytellers. So we provide the context, we provide the relevance, we can show evolution of naval architecture and design and storytelling. I mean, having the Western Flyer here is a perfect example of that, which I'll touch on in a minute. So look at all the stories you guys have to tell. It's unbelievable. I mean, each of these vessels, you can bring your own experience as a veteran, as a fisher, as a racer, as just an enthusiast into these stories, whether it's immigration, it's the military, it's movie making, it's immigration on the Star. There's so many amazing stories to tell, thousands and thousands, lifetimes of stories to tell with just the vessels that we already have here. So just a little bit about my background. I don't want to make this about myself, but I also want to tell you why my brain thinks the way I think. So my parents started a research vessel program at St. George's Prep School in Newport, Rhode Island 50 years ago. So 50 years, we're going to celebrate my dad. Actually in May, I'm going home to celebrate his heritage at that school. The program still exists, and that's actually my parents sitting on a boat teaching a bunch of high school students about maritime activities, but also there were huge researchers and marine field workers in tagging turtles and sharks all over the Caribbean and the Atlantic Basin. That's me actually reading an Asterix comic on the boom. My brother and I were raised on that boat and were homeschooled most of our lives, which is why my dad thinks I'm a little eccentric. And then I was in San Diego 30 years ago for the 92 and 95 America's Cups. I did study art history because I thought the sea would always be there when I felt like going back to it. But it's, I'll get to that in a minute, but I ended up coming back out here to look at the America's Cup in 92, 95 where my brother was working, and really fell in love with the intrigue, the technology, the innovations around the America's Cup vessels. Does anyone recognize where this is?
Right here.
Yeah, so my dad just texted this to me a few days ago. So this is at my brother's wedding, somewhere in this cabin. I'm not sure exactly where it is. Unfortunately, some of those people are no longer with us, but it's a really personal story that I have with this particular site, is to be here dancing in this room with my now ex-husband, then boyfriend, and now friend, and my parents and my brother and all of our old friends. But you know, we have our own stories that resonate with us when we think about these vessels, but also our own experiences in life. Why does somebody choose to get married on this boat? I mean, there's some connection to the sea, some connection to this beautiful space that people resonate with. That's my boat, which I'm hoping to bring out here someday. And I'm going to talk to Jim if he'll let me park it here until I can find a place to put her. But I've continued to sail. I don't race anymore, but I continue to have the journey. It's a really important part of my life. And so I have a lot of salt in my blood, and I really, it's one of the reasons that I am here in the first place. This is the winter sailing that we do in New England. In fact, there's a huge regatta out in Ivanpah next week that I will not go to, but my husband's going. But these are little land sailors. If anyone's ever interested, it is all ages, all levels, and it's wicked fun, as we say in Rhode Island. So one of the things that really concerns me and is very important to me in my heart and also my experience is ocean sustainability and ocean health, and what maritime industries have, how they've impacted the oceans over time, and what kind of work is happening in the world to remediate some of those problems. So there was an exhibit that I did with Alexis Rockman in partnership with marine scientists, including Sylvia Earle, if you know her, and Bob Ballard, who is a hoot, the one who discovered the Titanic. Wonderful guy, and so Sylvia is one of my great heroes. But one of the things that came out of this was this sort of sense of climate despair that my kids who are in their 20s experience. And I wanted to find out what the great minds in the world were doing about it. So I started to go to lots of conferences around the world, meeting with different companies in New England, and finding out what's happening around maritime technology that can actually remediate some of these issues. We also worked on this amazing collection of invertebrate glass models from Harvard, looking at a lot of primary observations of science from mariners throughout time, but mostly in the 19th century for that exhibit. Invasive species are really running rampant in the Mystic River, and it's all over the place, all over the world. So San Diego, actually with Ballast Point, and other types of animals moving from here to there. It's a pervasive problem, and it's something that we can speak to very legitimately as maritime institutions. So just a quick case study, one of the angles I took was to look at the new blue economy, what it is that NOAA, unfortunately, hopefully not disbanded at this point, because who needs weather? So anyways, looking at marine transportation, ocean exploration, seafood competitiveness, tourism and recreation, and coastal resilience. These are all stories pretty much every maritime museum I know talks about, including this one. So how do we start talking about where these things stand today in an authentic way based on our own collections, our own experience, and our own sites? We had the Charles W. Morgan, which is an 1841 whale ship, who was legitimately one of the most important blue economy icons of her day. She was incredibly successful. She made a lot of money, and she never really had a hard day. So she is an icon of blue economy. It's just a different term for something that's been going on for thousands of years. So one of the things that I found really interesting was to connect the past to the present. When people look at these sort of wackadoodle shipping ships that are going off and around these days in the newspaper, almost none of that's new. SailGP is not new, none of this is new. So this is one of my favorite pictures I've ever come across that I have on my screensaver. But it's a World War I airplane wing mounted onto a star vessel, which we actually have one here too. And it was an experiment of Butts Whiting in 1923, so it was 100 years ago. Obviously the hull was not meant to accommodate that type of wing, but these are. So these are now developed, as many other vessels have been, to be basically an airplane on its side. So one wing is in the water and one wing is in the air, and they're fixed. And it's an absolutely fascinating thing to me when people are talking about these new things and these new fangled blah blah blah, and it's not new. None of it's new. It's an evolution that we can talk about as a museum to tell people like why that works and what was the history behind the thinking of it. But I just, yeah, absolutely love that particular vessel. So here's a real world example of that. This is a real boat that goes places, and it's trying to decarbonize, or at least lower carbon. Decarbonize completely, to me, is a very challenging thing to promise. But this is a fixed wing that bends down so you can go under bridges on this particular vessel, and it does indeed save them carbon. And then these vessels, of course, with the America's Cup, have become just such a hybrid. It's like a Klingon warship to me. But there's just something beautiful about it anyway. But these kinds of fixed wings, and now this is actually a hybrid of all those different technologies in one vessel. This, to me, is one of the most fun things to talk about when we think about blue economy. This is actually qualified as a Coast Guard vessel because it is a flying machine that if it went above the width of its wings, it becomes an airplane, and it's under the regulations of FAA, which is a very long process, super challenging to get. So they decided to keep her lower to the ground, to the water, and she now classifies as a Coast Guard jurisdiction. And you don't hire an airplane pilot, you hire a boat captain. So if you have a six-pack license, you can fly this thing. And it's crazy. What could go wrong? And they are going gangbusters. They're a startup in Rhode Island, they're selling them in New Zealand, and they're a little electric commuter plane, but don't call it a plane. it's a boat, but it's just, I just love it. So I just love all the rules are just hilarious. So imagine you're a kite sailor going 500 miles an hour. You're not showing up on their radar, and they're going 125. So good luck. Yeah, but I think it's fabulous. And then just these other ones, of course, like the one on the right. Actually, the air seas actually works. That's why the slides were screwed up. And then Wissimo Michelin, which I've talked to these guys. This is a thing. They're inflatable sails. So to do the same thing as folding down, these actually inflate like a Michelin tire. So these are in production in France, and actually this little vessel is already out sailing around. I'd love to have it come visit. And again, what could possibly go wrong? I just think it's fabulous. But I love like human intuition to try to solve the same problems. So the whole sails go down to the ground if you're going under a bridge. I don't know what happens when you puncture it, or what the lifespan is, but they're just, I don't know, I just think it's so fascinating. And then this is cool too, because I met this woman at a conference in Lisbon. She is a schooner sailor, a tall ship sailor, her whole adult life until I guess she looks like she's 12, but maybe she's 30. But she founded this company in the Bahamas called Veer. And you can see here it has no rigging, and it has these amazing sort of, again, a wing of a sail, which looks kind of familiar if you look at some more historic pictures. This is also not new. That's the Maltese Falcon on the right. That's a private vessel that has the same kind of technology. But I'll show you, I think, in a second. But the sails go into the mast, and you just can operate that entire vessel, the Maltese Falcon, with an iPad and one person. There's no rigging, nothing on the decks. It's so cool. It's so crazy. So all the sails go into the mast, and then they spin. And yeah, it's wild. So this again, not new, which I think is so fascinating. So this is Wilhelm Prolsch, who designed this very technology in advance of the anticipation of the OPEC crisis, but the technical material didn't exist to build that vessel yet. So he had the idea, but we didn't have the technology to actually create the ship. So now we do have that technology, and there are several super yachts out there that are using the same technology, and it's based on clipper ships. And instead of having the space between the sails, between the spars, that's closed gaps, so they become more like a wing and spin. So these are some of the partners, I'm not going to go through them all, that I sort of touched base with and Mystic and signed MOUs with and did a lot of work with around all of these technologies. Actually I didn't even know it was out, and John Law just told me, but I just had a piece in Seahorse about this stuff. If you guys read that magazine, they didn't even send me one. But this is where I think museums can really make a difference, is talking about these types of subjects. This is Rick Spinrad. Unfortunately now he's protesting outside of NOAA's office in DC, which is super annoying to me because I love him and I think he's an amazing person. But part of these partnerships, part of this work was to get the attention of NOAA. And now NOAA is sending, well, if they exist in the next couple days, has been sending representation from their offices in DC to work with under-resourced kids in Connecticut at Mystic Seaport Museum to talk to them about ways to get into maritime activities through the federal government job positions that are available in Blue Technology. OceanX is one of my partners in my past experience, and hopefully will be so again here, but they're doing research all over the world. And then there wasn't a sort of a center of gravity for blue economy in Connecticut, so I made one. So these are some of the partners in all kinds of different blue tech in Connecticut that are now working together. Fair Mahan is now also in San Diego. Greenwave is in San Diego and New Zealand, and some of these other partners are also gaining a big presence here in this area. Deep Sea Challenger was a partner as well, and that's my new buddy, James Cameron. Never met him in person, but he made a couple videos for me, which was really great. And it's so fun to finally actually have a submarine in the water, because I'm very interested in looking at those technologies as well, and augmenting some of our displays. I've been talking about these subjects around the world. This is actually me with some people from the Royal Museums Greenwich, and some pretty snappy authors, which was fantastic. So really looking towards how we leverage these stories with maritime museums around the world, and many of them are now participating in this kind of work. Port of San Diego is really exciting in that they're doing all of this already. So I've been talking to them about telling their story about supporting startups in blue technology around the Port of San Diego, and how the museum can leverage our platform to talk about their great work, but also being a testing site for some sort of low impact blue tech activities happening around this port. As I look off the side of the Berkeley between us and Western Flyer, and there's like plastic and crates and stuff all over the place, there are some blue tech companies that help with some of that stuff, which I think would be a really fun learning opportunity for students. There is a Blue Tech Week, which we're going to participate in November, and that's going to be at the same time as One Ocean Expedition visiting us, which I'll show you a slide of, but really cool stuff happening all around us, and I just would love to make the public more aware through our platform. So this is a vessel visiting the Statsrad Nemcool One Ocean Expedition that's going around the world and stopping in San Diego in November. Of course, we're going to partner with them when they come in. Teresa Smollen's been all over it already, and the Blue Tech Week and us are going to do some events around their visit. The Atlantis from Woods Hole was just here a couple weeks ago. I hope you guys got a chance to see it. And she'll come back in October and hopefully also be a visiting vessel, if not at our docks, because she's enormous and needs a forklift. But we'll certainly be doing some programs with them also. What I think is really, this is Alvin. If you're not from the East Coast, you might not be as wildly enthusiastic. I have Alvin socks. I have a t-shirt. I'm kind of wild. I'm obsessed with this little submarine. But it's one of the most famous submarines in the world. And she was just here doing an amazing undersea archaeological work, looking at a submarine that sank in, I think it was, someone can correct me, but like 1919? Am I saying that right? Yeah, 1919, when they were testing off of San Diego and two submarines crashed and she sank in 10 seconds. And it was a really tragic story, but they just went down recently and did a lot of work on that submarine. So I'd love to have them talk about that project sometime in October if they can. Just up the street, Scripps is building the world's first hydrogen hybrid research vessel, which will be launched hopefully next year. Love to have her come here and do a program with our folks. And so I've been meeting a bit with Scripps to talk to them about that. And you guys will probably have seen the Crowley first electric tugboat is right down the road. So these are things that we can point out to people. How cool is that? Like when people see these things going by, that our docents, our volunteers, our staff can point out all the amazing naval evolution that's happening around us. And then Western Flyer, having grown up on a research vessel, and you're going to hear a lot about this boat. Sorry, the throat's giving out. A lot about this boat in the coming days. But what an amazing story! And this, to me, is that marriage of marine science, the humanities, restoration, education, and that she's had so many lives. I don't know if any of you guys have read the fabulous book called "The Life of the Object" by Connett Winterson. I think it's Jeanette. No, it's not Connett Winterson. Life of the Object, if you look that up. But it's really about this one thing, this one object, and how many lives it's had. Western Flyers had 1 billion lives. Star of India's had 1 billion lives. There's so many layers to these stories, and she represents kind of all the things that I just talked about in many ways. Using her platform from a fishing vessel to a science vessel to another fishing vessel, a lifetime, to an undersea vessel. I heard 3.5. I'm not sure what the half is all about, but I gotta ask about that one. But she's just a gorgeous boat. Even if she had nothing to do with Steinbeck and you knew nothing about her story, she's just a gorgeous thing. Love to have her stay here forever, to be honest. Another quick case study I want to mention, because you'll see this also coming about. I'm also a global, I'm on the board of the International Congress of Maritime Museums, which is about 200 museums around the world. I just came, that's why I have a cold. I was just in Genoa for our annual meeting. But I'm also the global leader for a Maritime Refugee Project, which has about 40 museums around the world involved. We just came up with this logo. I've done a lot of work at Mystic on our research, our refugee vessels. But as of now, I'm looking at a couple of different stories, but some really fantastic ones that are relevant to this institution. This has actually had the flag that I got permission to have created for the project. Was flying over the Amsterdam Museum at the Congress last year, which was very exciting. Basically, we reached out to all the museums who are members of ICMM, which is again that international congress, And we asked for samples from their collections of different boats, of stories, of photographs, oral histories that have anything to do with maritime refugees. Obviously, it's a very hot topic in various parts of the world, including this one. But it's also a very old story. This has been going on for thousands of years, that people have escaped by sea. So this is, yes, a charged story, but it's also a real story and things that are happening around us. And as maritime museums, I think there's a duty to talk about those stories. So these are examples of Vietnamese boats, from Vietnamese boat people from the museum in Australia. This is actually a boat that lives at Mystic Seaport, but it's from the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City, because they don't have a dock. But this is a Gerda 3, who's a just gorgeous little vessel that was instrumental in saving Jews coming from Sweden into Denmark. Denmark into Sweden. and saved hundreds and hundreds of Jews sort of sneaking onto the boat at night and hiding in the fish hold underneath. And we had people come in who had that heritage, who got into that hold and just burst into tears. It's an incredibly visceral experience. And she's just a beautiful boat, and there's a big exhibit in New York at the host museum, at the owner museum, if you ever get a chance to see it. So of course this is what happens here, and John Merrill has been actively looking in for a Penga boat for our collection to talk about some of these stories as it relates to San Diego. It's a real story, and it will be political, but that's what museums do. If we didn't have a story to tell and a position to take, we'd just be a warehouse. So every time you tell a story, you're telling it from a certain perspective. So this is something that we can present the information and the true story, and then people can have a discussion about it. And this goes for all things, I think, in museums. So a different way for us to engage with both people, not just from Mexico, is I came across this fabulous little project in Little Saigon that's opening this year around Refugee Day, World Refugee Day in June, which is a garden dedicated to Vietnamese boat people, including plants and a boat, celebrating the sort of Vietnamese Americans who live in this particular area. So I will be reaching out to a lot of them, and I'm really hoping, with your help and the help of the crew of the Swift, is that we can invite some of those Vietnamese boat people as a celebration of their garden to come out on a Swift boat, or at least meet some of our veterans and celebrate their own heritage and experience here in San Diego. And this is a part of a larger story, so it's not just about people who come here as refugees, but it's part of a larger immigration story. And of course, the star, as you all well know at this point, it'll be on the test. No, just making that up. She has her own incredible history as an immigration vessel, and I think that's important to acknowledge. And when I was just in Genoa at their Maritime Museum, they have a whole, the museum is massive, and they have a whole floor dedicated to immigration, and there's a big part of that that actually focuses specifically on maritime refugees, but it's wrapped into this larger story about Genoa and Italy and immigration in and out of Italy. This is the Galata Maritime Museum where I just was. You'll notice they also have a submarine, but I'm bringing this up because this is a new partnership that I'm working on that I hope will become a big part of our heritage here. And so it's not only reaching out to the Vietnamese community through the boat project, the refugee project, not only reaching out to our Blue Tech partners and the Port Authority through their work in ocean sustainability, of course also reaching out to the Portuguese and Italian communities in terms of our fishing heritage and all kinds of other alliances we have. But Galata and I were meeting about becoming sister institutions. The port there is very similar to San Diego, except it happens to be thousands more years old. But it is a place where the mountains meet the sea, and it is a place of all kinds of industries. So when I'm sitting in my office here, I see cruise ships pulling up. When I'm sitting there in my hotel, cruise ships going by. Lots of little fishing boats going out every day, as we do here, longer term things. Of course, it's a major industrial port city. And so we have a lot of alliances, and one of the things I realized is that our Italian community here actually has a lot of Genoa heritage. So I'm working with them to become a partner city institution and to help us sort of connect more engagingly with our Italian partners here in Little Italy and elsewhere in California. So hopefully more to come on that shortly. I think we have a lot to learn from each other. So quickly, I have absolutely no idea how much time I have left, sorry, I'm babbling away. I wanted to talk to you briefly about the Maritime Museum's Gateway Project, which people might ask you about. I don't know if you've heard of this. Okay, I'm sure Ray's talked about it a million times. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how I'm thinking about this as well. So this is the building here that you've probably become familiar with. And then the goal is to create, of course, one entrance to the museum, not two, not three. Take the star away from the Embarcadero, have the ships much better protected, and a new system. This is not the layout that's going to happen. This is an incredibly old picture. But this is actively being discussed even as of yesterday of where the boats are going and how we're going to phase them and all that. So phase one is to move the boats over here from the Embarcadero down a couple, maybe 50 feet. New barges to be discussed later. Huge, lots of conversation about that right now. And then, but part of this project is, it's not just the building, it's not just moving the boats out, but also I'm thinking of the Gateway Project much more holistically. So what are the stories we're telling? How are we introducing people to what in the world am I looking at? And what is the port? What is Maritime? Why am I standing in this building? So I'm thinking about, and love your feedback, different ways we can introduce the public, engage the community in the building before they head out to the ships. So perhaps one thought is to, of course, talk about what is the port, what's its history, who are the people, what kind of industries are happening here. Also, looking at it, perhaps a teaser to each vessel. So if you want to learn about immigration, about fishing, if you want to learn about cargo ships, if you want to learn about metal vessels, go look at the Star. If you want to learn about different stories from the Dolphin, this is where that story is. If you want to actually go out on a boat, there will be a little dock here for Pilot and Swift as well. But so there are different ways to introduce, tease people, not take away from the boats, but to try to entice people to come inside and learn more about them. One thing that Sally is a rock star, project manager, besides all of the other things she does for this project, is that we are looking to simplify this design, just FYI. Because it has gotten really quite extravagant, and we're trying to simplify it and make it a little bit more feasible for the museum financially. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the project, but that's where we are now, is looking at next steps with permitting and how to wrap in a lot of the stories I just told you, but also the stories you've been learning about into that project as a holistic approach. One worry I have, of course, is that it's hard to bring a donor to come, please give us $40 million for this project, and yet we have vessels that sorely need attention at the same time. So that I as a donor would say, you're not taking care of what you already have, so why would I give you $40 million? So I'm trying to wrap all of these needs into this project so we can start taking care of some of those things as we look towards the building. There's a lot of work to do, and I totally recognize that. And we have such a great team here, but we need the resources to try to make more of these repairs that are sorely necessary to keep our fleet alive and stewarded well and keep them sailing. And that's a street view of the rendering of it. It's the same architects who did the port side, so it has all this stuff happening. So Sally and I will be looking at how we can simplify some of this and make it much more of a sustainable design, something that we will be very proud of, that's going to do all the things we needed to do, but will really help the museum move into a more sustainable future. So this is my last slide, but this again, and it's so cool, and actually I love that Kiki's here. Our resident Italian staff has been so helpful with thinking about some of these stories. This is actually a Genoese man telling stories to a couple little boys about Sir Walter Raleigh's adventures. And so this is it's something that I hope inspires you, that when we hear as storytellers, we've already pre-selected ourselves to be in the story that we're in. You all are sitting here because you care about Maritime, because you care about this museum. You have your own sea story that compels you to be here and to take so much time to learn about all the things we have to talk about here. and hopefully bring your own spin to these stories and your own perspectives to the visitors. But we need that. We need the stories, and we need you guys. So I really, really hope that I see you on the decks, sitting like this. You don't have to have this outfit at all. But to really inspire the next generation to care the way you guys care. I grew up on the ocean. I didn't really have a choice, but I happen to love it. A lot of people don't, but we have to think about our visitors and how do we get them to feel excited? Where can we find that connection with them? What do they care about? So your experience as a veteran, as a teacher, as a sailor, just please bring that with you and make it your own, because that's where people are gonna find that passion and find that in themselves. And we don't know yet what some of their passions are gonna be, so we just have to be open and receptive to finding those connections for them so that they fall in love with this place the way I have and the way you guys have, and keep this place going for another 100 years. I'm not sure how long the boats are gonna float. We're gonna I'm not sure, but we'll keep going. We'll keep the star for sure. We can keep her going forever. But thank you so much, you guys, for everything that you've done for the museum, and I'm happy to take any questions if I still have time. Yeah, okay.
All you want.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
Thought about putting like a little warning when you walk in the building. Like a lot of museums you go to about 20 to 15-minute, movie about the museum.
That would be amazing. Yes, we have talked about, different ways to introduce the public, and I think that would be lovely. There is a theater that's going to be on the second floor, so that'll be open when you come in and get a ticket, and you certainly can have films playing there constantly.
National Parks do that. That's one of the first things I asked. There's a lower here where you're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
Really helps.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'd love to do that. Yes?
You probably already know this, but this is the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, and Admiral Terry Craft is doing something over on the Midway with the Vietnamese community, so you might want to latch onto that.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I did actually meet with Terry recently. He told me about that, and I said, well, yeah, we have to do something together, so thank you. Yes?
To enhance our meeting with the public, any chance of extending the hours during the summer?
Yeah.
That's a great suggestion. What has
Right
happened
now,
in the past?
we're stopping selling tickets at 4 in the afternoon, and the sun doesn't go down till 7.
That is a great
In the past,
question.
we've been open till 8 or 9 p.m. depending on the time of year.
Okay, I will totally look into
Yeah,
that.
since COVID, we haven't been doing it.
Well, that's crazy. Okay, well, we'll talk about that. Yes?
You mentioned that I really wanted to focus on preserving and improving the boats we've got. Are there any definite plans for how we're gonna do that?
That is another awesome question. Yes. So the team is working on exactly that right now. So you guys have met Jake, our fabulous director of maintenance, and Jim, and they're looking at updating all the maintenance plans and looking at what the needs are, putting some prices on things, and then we're going to come up with a long-term plan to just also get ahead of the game. Obviously, there are always surprises. I have a boat, and they always cost you more than you think, and not at the right times. But we're going to try to have a good plan in place for what we know, what we can expect. This year we have 2 dry docks happening at almost the same time, which is sort of a leftover from COVID. That shouldn't happen. It's really hard on the museum, but it has to happen this year. So we'll try to get out of that. This is the last year that's going to happen, and that really is because of COVID and some delays. So we'll be working on exactly that.
In addition to maintenance, unfortunately, it seems that we would have to have a retirement plan for these vessels as well as a replacement plan. So is there talk about all that as well?
Yeah, there's certainly, as we look at our resources, we have a very small staff. We have wonderful volunteers, but there's just only so much we can do with the resources available to us at this moment. So we are gonna have to think about whether or not we retire a couple of boats, whether we replace a couple of boats, or if we wanna add different boats in the future and leave some room for that, just like any collection. So yeah, we'll definitely be looking at all of our options. Mm-hmm.
In reference to extended hours, one of the problems I hear has been parking. Is there some way to make it readily available? What mass is available to trolley and the 994?
Well, we we are talking with the Old Town Trolley, but parking is a problem. And, yeah, so we have been discussing all the options available to us. Another problem too is that, just to make it more complicated, so the Midway is doing the big Freedom Park, which is wonderful, but they're gonna lose 200 parking spots, when they do that project. So they're gonna try to shuttle them across the street, but that's owned by the city of San Diego, and this is owned by the Port Authority, so the Port Authority is losing money, and blah, 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 so.
The blue line and the green line are perfectly doable to get here.
Yeah.
And that might be something that certainly visitors, but also local people would want to use as opposed to fighting the parking lot.
That's a great, I have to check and see if we have that on our website of like ways to get here and make sure that that's a very strong suggestion. Like if you live near a train line, you might want to try it.
Or you can park near them and take it.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I know a lot of our staff do that, but we should make sure visitors are very well aware of the public transportation options. Yes, Sally?
Just to expand on that, we actually are renegotiating our lease, and one of the big conversations is parking and parking options, especially because part of our environmental impact report and everything flagged parking as an issue.
Yeah.
So it is in discussion about options and times of day and different things we can do about extending hours on the meters and things like that. So it's a balance with the port right now and their regulations and some of the other businesses in the communities who also are affected by parking.
Great. Any other questions? Yes?
I've heard about a request to sail Star for her 100 years in San Diego in 2027.
That is something I'm really hoping we can do. It would be absolutely fabulous to make that happen.
Do you have a rough ETA on the year that the building would happen? Would that interfere?
No. Sally? No, we hope that we can start construction on the building in the near-ish future, but Star will stay where she is for the time being, and that hopefully wouldn't make any disruption to that plan. But yes, we are hoping to have funds available. We're waiting to hear about a possible request. So no promises, but that's where I'm hoping if that happens, that makes it more realistic to sail in 27.
On a comment, could there be a sound room in the new building, wind in the rigging and so on? And also one that creates odor and smell like on board? I know it's not, but I would go. Dry pod and zero, you have to use other car.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, actually I have some exhibit designers going to talk to Sally about that yet. We're coming in Thursday from Boston. And so looking at some of those interactive experiences we can wrap into the space. Yeah, absolutely. Uh-huh.
Have a gift shop sell diesel fuel perfume.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if the new plans for the exhibit, or the new museum, include like an expansion or an improvement of the archival spaces?
Yes, it does, actually. So one of the things that we're hoping to do is in the new barges, we'll have to get at least one new barge that will have adequate space for more archival room, as well as more education spaces, and Peter has requested 5,000 bathrooms for the kids. So one will be just bathrooms. But yes, we're looking for that. And also what I'm hoping to do is to create some kind of a sheltered workspace so that we can do some of the work that the volunteers are doing and the staff are doing, and view of the public in an enclosed space that we can lock at night, but it will give that, a bit more of that education around the skill sets required to maintain the vessels. So I'm stealing some of that from Rotterdam Maritime Museum, which is a really cool exhibit, also from Mystic, obviously, but it would be really nice to have that be part of the plan as well. Yes?
I know we've requested a waiver with the Coast Guard so that we can reinstitute our Pacific Heritage Tours.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we stand on that?
Good question, I have to ask John Merrill. Where we're standing on that at the moment. I know there's some issues with, with the vessel design. So that's, I know Jim and John are looking into all possibilities right now to see how we can get around that or get exempt from that. And actually, you guys all obviously know Susan. So Susan is actually, one of her new job is to kind of look into things that are holding back historic vessels for the greater good of maritime museums around the world. So we'll hopefully be getting some guidance from her as an advocacy as well.
So we do hopefully plan for this to do that in the future.
I would love to. Yeah, we just have to make sure that we're gonna be compliant and, yeah.
Okay.
But I think it would be fabulous. I wanna go. It's all about me, I wanna go. Yeah.
And looking at earlier drafts of the gateway layout, the gateway project layout, it looked to me like there were some beautiful buildings being considered, but I wondered how much access for moving large objects out to and from the ships was gonna be available. If we need to get yards down without, say, having to tow Star of India over from where it would be offshore, over to the Embarcadero to get yards on and off, as we just took off the main Royal on Sunday. It looked like the access was not gonna necessarily be designed with maintenance accessibility as a primary requirement.
Yes, that is a challenge. So, it is something the team is discussing for sure. In fact, one of the barges we were looking at yesterday has a built-on crane. I don't think that's probably the one we're gonna necessarily get, but it's a 400-foot long, 100-foot wide.
100 wide, 400 foot long, and 25 feet tall.
Yeah, it would need a lot of ballasting.
It needs a lot of ballasting.
Yeah, but that one at the moment has a crane on it, so Jim's pushing for that one. But yes, it is a problem, we're gonna have to address it, and I don't know exactly what the answer is yet.
The other thing I really noticed in looking at some of the early plans, at least, was for Star, it was proposed to have a series of pilings for the dock, and then Star inland of those pilings, so that it would be, when we have a weather event coming in, and there's the fetch across the bay, that Star would end up hanging on its mooring lines, instead of being pressed up against.
Yes. Yeah.
Instead of up against the barge. The prospect of Star hanging on its mooring lines at 0200 during a storm is terrifying.
It is, yes, and so we were just having that conversation yesterday. So we're gonna, definitely part of the plan is to do the best thing for our vessels. And so there's different ways, perhaps we've discussed having dolphins on the outside of the Star so she could sort of push against those. But, we wanna make, so, Sally's gonna be speaking to some engineers as well about how we can not only moor the boats, but also mooring the barges so that they are incredibly well suited for holding up against a storm.
You mentioned that schematic that you had was an old one.
Yeah.
But one of the other things that came up was if you have the Star parallel to the sidewalk, then you're not allowing it, you're taking the seas on the beam.
Yes, so
As opposed to getting it angled out a little bit so that your phase relationships on the wave fronts coming in
right.
give you a better ride.
Yeah, I know. I didn't have one this morning.
Okay.
So, but now it is angled.
It's at 30
Yeah.
degrees.
Good, oh, okay, thank you.
It is. So you can still see her, but she's better protected.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, feel free to email me. All of you very, very much. And I hope to see you here all the time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brophy. Speaking of the culture of the volunteer staff here, we're all just waiting to be asked. So, I know the culture here. You're now our captain. Please don't hesitate to ask. We're all waiting.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay.
Overture, curtain lights. This is it, we'll hit the heights. And oh, what heights we'll hit. On with the show, this is it. Oh, tonight, what heights we'll hit. On with the show, this is it. Oh, you want one for it. That's the overture. Okay, before we go on any further, I need some volunteers. You want to be a volunteer? It's easy. All you got to do is when I point at you, you shout that out. How about you? All right, when I point at you, shout that out. Got it? And when I point at you, shout that out. All right. Now, before we go any further, we need to do something where everybody stands up. So please, everybody stand up. And we will recite the docent's prayer. Now, you may know it by another name, but you know it. So please recite it with me. The mission of the Maritime Museum of San Diego is to serve as a community memory of our seafaring experience by collecting, presenting our rich maritime heritage and historic connections with the Pacific world. All right. All right, you can sit down now.
That's gonna be on the
It was on my gun, don't let me interrupt.
All right. That's something we should do every time we have a meeting. We should stand up, we should recite that. That's why we did that. So, our sign over here, tell me a story. We see that week in and week out. If you tell stories, what does that make you? A storyteller, yes, indeed. It also makes you a performer, and it makes you an actor. Actor. I knew it was there. Thank you. This is what we do. We act. We have an opportunity to set the stage, and we come up here and we act by telling our stories. But in order to do that, we have to do this. Oh, yeah. You didn't think about that now, did you? In order to tell our stories, we have to show up. All right. Louder next time. Okay. We are the face of the museum as far as the public knows. We are the ones who set the reputation for the Maritime Museum. That can be a pretty heavy responsibility. Now, how do we do that? First of all, by our appearance. How do we look? How do we behave? How do we project ourselves to the public? Mike K, can you stand up, please? He doesn't know I'm doing this. Nobody looks sharper in their docent gear than Mike K. He always looks sharp. He always has a big smile on his face. He always walks with a bounce in his step. He is what I lie awake at night dreaming of being like Mike K. When I'm a docent. So appearance is very key to what we do. When you put on your docent gear in the morning and you walk out your front door, from that moment on, you are impacting the reputation of the Maritime Museum. And you always want that to be a positive representation. I ride the trolley down here. And when I'm on the trolley, I try to make eye contact with people. I look at them in the eye, and I'll acknowledge them, I'll nod. If they nod back, that's great. If I say good morning to them, and they say good morning to me, that's great. If they don't, I still tried my best to make a good impression, right? The other thing is your attitude. Now, when I come here, people who have interacted with me while I've been here know that I often say this. It is a great day to be a docent at the Maritime Museum of San Diego. I say that a lot, partly to convince myself, but also to let other people know that that's how I feel. That's how I feel. And I'll say that to people that come to the museum. I'll say it to the people that work here at the museum. I'll say it to the people out there on the rail. Those are great people to talk to. Try to convince them that it's time to come in and view the museum. So,
That's why we've locked you out of the museum office.
yeah, you know what? Funny you brought that up. Thank you, Nancy. I wasn't going to include this in the presentation, but I'm going to now. Thank you very much. Quite often when I get here in the mornings, I'll make a walk through the office to say hi. And it gives the people in the office the opportunity to say one of two things under their breath. Either, thank God Dennis is here, or, oh God, Dennis is here. I'm beginning to get an idea of which one is going to predominate. All right, so how do we interact with our guests? All right, there are 4 ends to interacting with our guests. Any guesses? Wrong. First one, you engage. Oh, don't! You engage with your guests. I want to go forward. Come on. You want to enhance their experience here. Okay. None of this is on the test. This is all for your benefit. Enhance, enrich their experience. I'll go into detail on all these in a little bit. And finally, you want to entertain. So, what am I talking about when I talk about engaging? Catch up to myself here. First of all, when you engage, you talk to everybody. You go up to, hey, how you doing today? Anything interesting that you want me to point out to you? Just engage with them. Now, movie quote coming up. Look I. Always look I. You get bonus points if you can tell the movie and the character that said it.
Mr. Miyagi.
There you go. Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi. Look I. Always look I. Taps Danielson on the head. Look I. All right. We focus on the kids. Family group comes in. The parents are more concerned with the kids having a good time than themselves. So you focus on the kids. Family group comes up. Hey, how you doing, folks? Hey, how are you doing there, Junior? And if you can get Junior to interact with you, that's great. That's great. The parents will love you for getting the kids involved and not really ignoring, but the parents just come along for the ride. So focus on the kids. Now, who has the map? Whatever member of that family group has the map is the leader of that group. Just by default. Am I right? Right. If the 10-year-old has the map, and he says, I want to go over here to the submarine. Well, guess where the family's going? They're going to the submarine. And you point that out. Junior, you got the map? All right, you get to go wherever you want. Go for it. Enhance. That's where you take the information that the guests have available to them on the signage, and you bounce that off of some of the things that they can see. So you need to be familiar with the signage. If you're out by the San Salvador, good God, there's a lot of signs out there. So many signs, and so much information. Your job is to take the information that's on those signs and connect it with the actual ship. What's next here? There you go, make connections between the different displays and the signage. Enrich. Enrich, you're going a little bit further. You're going to take your deeper knowledge. You're going to have more knowledge available to you than is available to the guests on the signs. And you're going to expand on their experience.
For instance.
A little louder, please.
For instance.
For instance, we have a torpedo down on the main deck of the Berkeley. And there's some basic information about that torpedo. I happen to have done some research on that and on the ship, the oil tanker Montebello, and I can expand for about 10-15 minutes about the interaction between that torpedo and the Montebello back on December 23rd, 1941. I'm not going to go too much detail here. It's incumbent upon you to go to your deeper knowledge. Your training manual, excellent source of information. Excellent. For those of you that are taking the test next week, know that like the back of your hand. I'm going to give you 2 hints right now. First of all, page 247. Page 247. And the associated definitions in the glossary. Big hint there. Okay? You do your outside research. Now when I come here, or early on when I came here, I started doing informal training with my mentor, who is not here today. Where are you, Ben? And a lot of times when I would come down here on a Saturday, when Ben was usually here, well, he wouldn't be here. So I was left to my own devices, which can be a dangerous thing. But I would take my my notebook around to the different displays, different things that are on exhibit, and I jot down notes in my notebook. And I would go home and I would do a lot of research on that stuff. We used to have a model. Oh, here we go.
For instance.
There we go. We used to have a model on display of the USS Patoka. How many of you remember seeing the USS Patoka?
Hey, still does.
Is it still there?
It's still there.
I didn't see it when I was down there, but that's okay. USS Patoka was an airship tender. It had a really tall mast on it that the airship would sail along and tie up to it. I did some research on that. It worked with, I think, 4 different airships between the late 1920s and the mid 1930s. That's the kind of research that you should be able to do and enhance and enrich your talks. Now, you can bring in some personal experience. Andy does this very well. He has a long history in the Navy as an engineer and as a naval officer. I have a long history as an enlisted man in the Navy, and a lot of that I can bring into what I talk about. So take your personal experience, your personal history, and get that involved in what you are going to present to our guests. Make sense? Now, if you have a hard time doing that, well, you need to practice. And how do we practice?
Show up.
There you go. You show up. Okay. Next one is entertain. This is where you get to have some fun. If you're not having fun, you're not docenting right. You got to be able to have fun. Now, I know Dave Berg here, he has a lot of fun when he's doing it. Most of us do. If you're not doing it, not having fun, you're not doing it right, you need to fix that. Make the experience fun. Not just for you, but for our guests.
For instance.
For instance, when I'm on the San Salvador, I'm talking about the riding characteristics of the ship. Now, it is, hand gestures is a big part of this. I say it's relatively short. It's relatively wide around bottom, like a lot of us are nowadays. And so it'll do a lot of that. It'll do a lot of that. And when she does both at the same time, you get to hold on to your lunch. Good luck with that. All right. Use humor. Now there are fairy tales and there are sea stories. Now they could be exactly the same story. Fairy tale always starts out once upon a time. A sea story always starts out.
This is no shitter.
This is no bull. There you go. There's one other. If you're talking to an Air Force pilot, he'll start out by saying, "Well, there I was at 20,000 feet." So, how do we tell stories? How many of you are parents? Awful lot of people here that are parents. You are already expert storytellers. You've been telling your kids nonsense for years. Some of it's true, some of it's not. Some of it's well received, some of it's not. But you've been doing it for a long time. You got good at telling stories because you practice. And how do we practice? There you go. You're so good at that. That's awesome. Now, if you don't have much practice telling stories, tell stories the way you like to hear stories. If you like to hear it as a once upon a time, tell your stories once upon a time. That's okay. Okay, you'll get better. And you weave what you know into a short narrative. Now, how long does a story take? 30 seconds? An hour? 15 minutes? As long as you can stretch it. Yeah.
For instance.
There we go. We're on a roll.
Hey, Dennis, tell me a story.
Oh, we can do that better.
Tell me a story.
All right. On the surprise, I will ask a family, all right, how are you with your nautical terminology? And most of the time they go, I have no idea. So, all right, well, you know what they call the bathroom in the Navy. And then a lot of times I'll say, well, they call it the head. And why do you think they call it the head? And then I can go on for 10, 15 minutes talking about the use of the head, and I can transition from that to talking about the diet, because diet has a great deal to do with how often they would have to use the head. And going beyond that, talking about dietary deficiencies, like scurvy or beriberi. That can all be woven into one long narrative that may take me 10, 15 minutes to do. That's 10 or 15 minutes of them being entertained and you being entertaining. All right, here's the hard one. Develop a story that you can tell for every area that you are on, or every area that you're at on every vessel. That can take some time. I can tell that story about the head on the Surprise. I can talk about being at the quarterdeck. I can talk about being on the gun deck in the grade cabin. On board the San Salvador, I can talk about being in the captain's cabin in the whipstaff. I can talk about what's out on the main deck. I can talk about what's in the forecastle. In the Star of India, there are dozens of places where you can stop and talk about a particular area. You need to develop each one of those. Now,
Hey, Dennis, tell me a story.
oh, that's so good. That's so good. Listen to guests who have other knowledge or experience. I was walking around the museum one day, and there was a group of 4 women, all of them with English accents. One of them lived here, the other 3 were visiting her. Now, one of the visitors was a naval architect, and she was asking all kinds of questions. All these questions were way over my head. I had no idea what she was talking about. But she would immediately say, oh, all right, this is the answer to that particular question. I go, all right, cool. One of her friends would ask a question. She would jump in and answer that question. I'm going, you are my new best friend. Love talking to her. She was terrific. All right, now I said that I stand a lot of deck watch. And I do, that's primarily what I do. I'm here on Mondays and Thursdays generally, because that's what fits in with my schedule. Mondays, Maritime Museum. Tuesdays, laundry. Wednesdays, grocery shopping. Thursdays, Maritime Museum. Friday, granddaughter comes over to the house for about 6 hours. Saturday and Sunday, recovering from the granddaughter coming over for six or so hours. That's my week. When I get here, and I generally get here before the museum opens, I'll get here, 15, 20 minutes before the museum opens, and I do a walkthrough. I'll walk through the office and say hi to everybody, and they get their opportunity to go, oh God, he's here. And then I'll go out on the floating dock, and I'll go to the San Salvador. I'll check out what's going on there. Maybe there's some maintenance going on, maybe part of it's blocked off. Who knows? I'll find out when I go out there. I'll go out to the California and I do the same thing. I'll walk back past the Surprise, walk through the Surprise, find out what's going on there. Over onto the Star of India, whether or not we got education programs going on over there. I'll come back over to the Submarine, the Medea. I'll go through the different areas here on the Berkeley, find out what's going on. I do a walkthrough. So that's what I do. That's before I start engaging with the public. All right, now, when you're standing deck watch, come on in, folks. I don't bite, at least not hard. Start out where you feel comfortable. Now, Jonathan's sitting back here. Jonathan likes to hang out at the San Salvador. He's getting very good out there. I encourage him to expand, move beyond just the San Salvador. So he's starting to move beyond just the San Salvador, including the floating dock in California. Eventually, he's going to expand here to the Berkeley, over to the Surprise, over to the Star of India. But that takes time, and it takes practice, and it takes
showing up.
There you go. There you go. Now, what we want to get to ultimately is this. Ultimate goal would be a free-range docent. Now, that's what I consider myself. You know, I'm here, usually when I'm here, there's not another docent here. At least not another blue shirt. There are people that are docent qualified here doing their other things. So I have free range of the museum. I can go wherever I want, interact with who I want, say whatever I want. Nobody's here to argue with me. There are times, though, when other docents are here and they'll come up to me, where are you going to be today? I said, I'm going to be all over. Where are you going to be? Well, I'm going to be on the Surprise. Okay, well, I'll let you have the Surprise. That's fine. I'll take everything else. No worries. That's the goal, to be a free-range docent. You can act as the docent. You can tell great stories, no matter where you are, because you
Show up.
There you go. There you go. So that's what it takes to stand deck watch. And it just takes practice. So, being underway on the California and San Salvador. I've done both of those. Not exactly my favorite thing to do, but that's fine. But you have to know the history and the geography of the area, because you're going to talk about that as the ship leaves the harbor, goes out to open water, and as the ship comes back into the harbor from being out there. Now, keeping guests engaged for 4 hours, that's a hell of a task. That can be tough. So know that going in. If you're going to go out on the San Salvador, you're going to go out on the California, it can be tough to keep the guests engaged for that period of time.
Beautiful day to be a docent at the Maritime Museum of San Diego.
It's a great day to be a docent at the Maritime Museum of San Diego. Thank you for bringing that up again. Okay, scheduled tours. Now, we know that there's going to be a tour, Thursday and Friday, something like that? Rebecca sets those up, scheduled tours. What time do you have to be here?
Hour before, 14 minutes at least.
At least 15 minutes. All right, be early. Now, there's a saying in the Navy, and of course Andy knows this, and the others on active duty know this. If you're starting your watch at 0800, and you show up at 0800, you're late. You show up at 5 minutes to 8, you're late. If you show up 10 minutes before 8, you're still 5 minutes late. So, if you show up 15 minutes early, that's great. If you're doing a tour, show up even earlier. 30 minutes might not be a bad idea to show up if you're going to do a tour. Read through your docent tour speaking points. Now, how many of you have printed that out? A lot of you have. Excellent. I have too. I've added some stuff to it, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And you encourage interaction between yourself and your tourists. You don't want to be standing there just lecturing to them and then feeling beat down from all the information that you're piling on them. You want to interact with them. You want to find out what their interests are, find out what their interests aren't, so that you can kind of avoid that, and encourage them to ask you questions. You'd be surprised at some of the questions that have come up. Now, just about every day during the school year, we have education programs on board, largely on board the Star of India. Now, what happens there is they go into a different space-time continuum. They are in 1875, I think, something like that, and they're in England. And the Star of India needs some more crew members. And these kids are coming on board to be new crew members. We don't fit into their timeline. Matter of fact, most of the time when, as I'm wandering around, and I see that they've got the educational program going on, they will almost completely ignore me. I'm okay with that. Because they are in a different time frame. So, let them do their thing. They are excellent at doing their thing. They are so good. And they take those kids under their wings, and they get them to operate as a gun crew. They get them hauling on lines. They get them navigating, all that stuff. They do an excellent job. Our job as docents is to stay out of the way.
Hey, Dennis, tell me a story.
Oh, we gotta get better at that. Just last week, I think it was last week, or within the last couple of weeks, I was going on to the Star of India, and there was education programs going on, and I was heading up towards the forecastle on the main deck. And there was an elderly couple up there, and they were talking to one of the education department people. And as soon as I came around, and that education department person saw me, he says, "This person right over here will be happy to answer your questions." And I took the burden off of him of dealing with those people. And I loved it. It was great. Now, make others aware of that learning is taking place. If you have folks that are going on board the Star of India, for instance, and they, I forgot to point at you. For instance, here we go. You got folks going on to the Star of India, and you know there's education programs going on because you've already done a walkthrough, right?
Right.
Yeah, rattle your heads, there we go. You tell them, now we got education programs going on board here in the Star of India. You are welcome to listen in because they have a lot of good information, but please don't disrupt their learning process. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. They pay good money to come here and learn their stuff. Okay, Docent on Deck. That's a relatively new concept, I think. And what it is an impromptu tour. Now, I know Dave Berg is very good at setting those up. I know that Rich Wolf is very good at setting those up. And it's easy to do. Works well at opening time when you've got a line of people waiting to come in. Also, if you've got a line of people later in the afternoon, that might not be a bad time to do it. And what you say is, meet me here in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it happens to be, and I'll take you on a guided tour. A free guided tour. Everybody wants something free, right? Yeah. A lot of times what they'll do is say, you meet me in 15 minutes out in front of the gift shop, and I will take you on a tour. And then you take them on your 2-hour tour like you've been trained to do. Ask me about a mini tour. A lot of us have these lanyards that have a sign on it, double-sided sign. One side says, become a volunteer. The other says, ask me about a mini tour. Well, what's a mini tour? Well, that's kind of a vague definition there, but how I define it is that. Especially if they're just getting started. You pick the vessel, and I'll give you a tour. Simple. Some other people might interpret it a little bit differently. Mini tour might be just whatever's in your immediate area, and that's fine too. But it's a good idea to actually take them on an entire tour of the vessel. At Berkeley, it could take some time, half an hour, 45 minutes maybe. On the submarine, maybe 15 minutes, something like that. All right. Stump the docent. They're going to have some smart aleck show up and want to show off just how much he knows that he thinks you don't know. All right, that's called stump the docent. Now, I haven't seen it all that much from our guests. We do it occasionally, but not as much as I've seen it between docents. This happened to me not too long ago. Just within the last couple of months. Most often between docents. Smart aleck docent wants to put a little shame on whoever's talking. And say, well, can you talk about this? I sure can. Do you really want me to? All right. Let's not do that to each other, particularly if we're in the presence of our guests. That's just being ticky-tacky. And if you don't know, if they ask you a question you don't know, say you don't know.
For instance.
That's a very good question. And I'm gonna have to go look that up. I don't know the answer. I'm gonna have to go look that up. Which, first of all, gets you off the hook of coming up with an answer right away. You sort of give them the old Heisman stiff arm. But it satisfies them that they know they asked a good question. All right. Something that I just spoke to Rebecca about yesterday, because I was not real clear on, is gratuities. Now, there are times when people are going to want to give you money. What do you do with it? Are you allowed to accept it? Good question. Never expect one. Never expect a tip. You're not here to make money. You're here to talk to people and make their day a good one. You're not here to make money.
What do I do with that bottle of scotch he handed?
You call me up later and we'll deal with that stuff. Never, ever ask for one. That's rude, crude, and socially unacceptable. Now, you may want to provide a little bit of gentle hesitance. Say, oh, no, that's not necessary.
Put it in the box down at the gift shop.
All right, gentle hesitance, just to give them a little bit of pushback. And a lot of times they're going to insist, no, I want you to have it, you earned it, here you go. And it's okay to accept. You can say, thank you very much, I appreciate this. Now, what you do with that is up to your own conscience. And you stick it in your pocket, take it home with you. You can do that. There's nothing in the policies of the museum that says you can't do that. You can do that. Or if your conscience says, well, I don't really want to keep this, it makes me feel bad, you can put it in one of the donation boxes. We have one down next to the gift shop. There's another one over on the main deck of the Star of India. All right. Accoutrements. What do I have that helps me do my job when I come down here as a docent? First of all, just about everything I can bring here to the museum, I put in this sling bag. But for purposes of demonstration, today I've got my ditty bag. So what have we got in the ditty bag? Let's see. I ain't got ditty in there. Ditty, dum, ditty, doo. Yeah. All right. Now, I was pointing out Mike K earlier and how sharp he always looks. And well, sadly, I've sort of let things slip as far as my personal appearance, and it's my hat. Now, I've had this hat since before I started formal docent training. It's been 2.5 years. It's now sweaty and grubby and faded and dirty. You can see just how faded it is by doing that. You can see that's not how I want to represent this Maritime Museum. So it's time for me to retire this hat. I got a new one. Nice and shiny. All right. Now these they don't sell down at the gift shop. The hat itself I get at the swap meet, Kofi swap meet, for $3. You can't beat that with a stick. The patch that I get down at the gift shop, and that's with membership discount. That's about $7. So I got a new hat now. I talked about taking notes, and I have my Starfleet Engineering Notebook. Yes, I am a bit of a nerd. Now, do you have to have a Starfleet Engineering notebook? Yes, you do. Every time I'm here as a docent, it goes right here in my pocket. I talked about docent tour speaking points. I have this with me all the time. I printed it out, I laminated it. I had a few questions at the beginning to help me get a gauge on the group I'm talking to. First of all, because this has been a problem in the past, is English good for everyone? Now, one of the first tours I went on, it was a family group, and they spoke primarily Russian. Now, fortunately, we had a docent trainee at that time who could speak Russian, and so she sort of accompanied everybody along on that. Are there any mobility issues? Right, do we have people with walkers or wheelchairs or canes? That may dictate that you change up your tour a little bit. Is there somewhere else you have to be at a certain time? You know, some people, they say, well, I'm going to have lunch at 12 o'clock with my friend over here. I said, well, okay, well, we'll have to hurry through the tour. Has everyone had breakfast? That's not an obvious one, but I had a group of folks, well, it was a big group, probably about 15 people, and 3 of them hadn't had breakfast that morning. So they ended up cutting out of the tour early, after about an hour and a half, because they had to go eat something. So it's good to know ahead of time. Does anyone need sunscreen? Huh? During the summertime. I got it right here. Yep. SPF 50 sunscreen. Offer it to the people before we get started. Do we need to use a restroom before we get started? Yeah. Sometimes I need to use a restroom before we get started. So we come up here to the first place we go is up here to the McKinney deck on the, here on the Berkeley.
Let them know where the other bathrooms are.
Absolutely let them know that as we go through the museum, they will have the opportunity to use the other restrooms on the Surprise and on the Star of India. So a good thing to have with you. Now, when I was doing my final walkthrough, I did it with Bob Bolger over here. Now, have you ever noticed that you can't swing a wet swab around here without hitting somebody named Bob? It's true, it's true. I carried that copy of the docent tour speaking points with me the whole time for 2 hours, never once looked at it. Because it was all up here. You're going to be the same way. What else have we got in here? I talked about the lanyard that I wear. This one says become a volunteer. The other side says ask me about a mini tour. So people will ask me about a mini tour. Now, how many of you have one of these lanyards? Not enough of you. You need to go down and see Rebecca. She's got a whole bunch of them hanging up in her office. Now, I happened to take it out of the pouch that it came in and laminated it. I have a cheap little laminator at home, but it works out better for me that way. So I wear that all the time. Comes in handy. What else we got here? Oh, here's an important one. Here's an important one. This is something I put together that I call pocket specs. Pocket specs for Maritime Museum vessels. And I am listing the length and the beam and the draft and the displacement for all of our vessels. All of that extracted right from the Docent Trainee manual. Might not be a bad idea to get your hands on one of these. And I'll tell you how in a little bit. I'm making an impression on the trainees, yes. Now, it is kind of small print. I have to kind of go like this to read it sometimes. But this I always keep in my hip pocket when I'm standing deck watch. Now, this comes in handy. This is one of those little portable headset and speakers. This one happens to be Bluetooth connected. And this I wear around my belt or around my waist, connected with a headset. Ken Golden uses these all the time when he's giving sailing tours on board the San Salvador in California, and they work out very well. Now, when I do a 2-hour tour, getting towards the end of 2 hours, I've been trying to talk over the ambient noise around here. We're talking the airport over here, we're talking the Naval Air Station over there, we're talking about the traffic going by, and I get a really sore throat after an hour and a half, 2 hours. Using this, it's much easier for me to communicate first with our guests, and second of all, I don't have a sore throat at the end. This is about $50 total on Amazon. And you can come up and check it out a little bit later. What else have I got in here? What's this? Oh. I buy stuff from a company online called American Science and Surplus. Yeah, out of Chicago, yeah. I got a cheap pair of binoculars. $10. Cheap little lanyard, but they work pretty well. And just yesterday I noticed instead of 2 aircraft carriers across the way, we got 3. So I had to pull up my binoculars to see what the third one was because I couldn't quite read the hull number. It's hull number 68, USS Carl Vinson. This might come in handy.
It's a 68. 68 is Nimitz.
I knew I screwed that up. All right, this is a good thing to have. If you're going out on the San Salvador or on the California, this is a good thing to have. Real handy. It's got a nice little loop on the back, so you can attach that to your belt and have a good old time. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good here, Jim. I didn't even look at him. I knew what he wanted. Okay, now, a couple of weeks ago I was here and the weather was kind of drizzly. And so I carried around my little compact umbrella with me in case we had a cloud burst and our guests were stranded out somewhere and they wanted to go somewhere else. I go out there and help protect them with my little teeny tiny umbrella. Turns out we didn't need to do that at all. But what I did find out I was doing was I was carrying it around and using it as a pointer. I go, you know what? I need a pointer. So I went into my garage and I turned this on my leg. Now this looks like a prop from a Harry Potter movie, I know. Also a little bit like a belaying pin, there you go. And you can use something like this for pointing out. That's something I just came up with not too long ago. Now, one last thing to talk about as far as your accoutrements is liquid. It looks, no, it doesn't taste like diesel. You need to make sure you hydrate as you're here as a docent, particularly during the summertime. It gets warm down here, you're gonna sweat like a pig, or you're going to blush like a pig, however you want to put it, and you need to rehydrate. I happen to like Arizona peach tea, and that's what I have in here. If you like straight water, that's great. If you like some of Sean's scotch, that's great. As long as you stay hydrated, that's important.
Visitors need to know where water is sold at the gift shop and the drinking fountain on the
Do we sell water at the gift shop?
Yes.
We do? Okay, excellent.
The drinking fountain on the side.
There's one on the Star, and there's one out on the walkway next to the Surprise, but I don't think it works.
In the gift shop, we do sell water usually. We have Dramamine, we have Advil, we have sunscreen, so let our guests know that. And we have hats.
Oh, yeah, we do have it. All right. What's next? Trainee questions. Experienced docents, sit on your hands for a minute. Trainees, any questions?
So there's probably gonna be a time, you're having a good time, but you can sense with body language that whoever you're talking to is gonna say what's gonna stop.
Yep.
So is that happening?
Yes.
Okay. So then it's time to move on, or at least put in a fancy little line to make them react in one house.
One of the things that you learn through practice by
Showing up.
is how to read a person. Are they interested in listening to what you have to say? Or are they just going to roll their eyes and say, "Hi, how you doing?" "Oh, no, I don't want to talk to you." You kind of get that impression, and you can move on from there. Be right with you, Sean. Any other trainee questions? Yes.
Well, Michael's my
You know,
mentor, and we were walking
you
around,
had-
and I was asking,
you had a lot to learn. However, if you approach anybody, you ask about them. Find out who they are, what their interests or lack of interest are before you determine what level you're going to engage with them in.
Thank you, Sean. All right.
Question back here.
Back to your question. We'll finish this one question up.
I would just, like you said, kind of that coordination of that launch where you, I got the impression, Michael say that you would sign up for like certain schedule or times, but now, since COVID, that hasn't happened, you just kind of, like you said, you show up, you can be this freelance docent if you want. What would be the protocol? Obviously, you wouldn't want to maybe have two docents next to each other on the same ship or vessel, for example, because you could then, like you said earlier, be in conflict in terms of jumping in and talking to guests. So is it best if you see that there's a docent already, for example, on the poop deck of the Star, you could still be on the Star, but maybe you could go down to the tween deck, or
Right.
I guess I didn't know really.
You do want to try to spread yourselves out.
Or you
Yeah.
would- Or would you just go to another ship, and if you didn't see anybody there, you could kind of make that, and you're saying you don't have to stay there, for an hour or 2 hours, you could say maybe 15, 20 minutes and then move to another one. So I guess my question is, there's some freedom and flexibility.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. if I'm on a vessel, this happens to me a lot, if I'm on the San Salvador and there aren't any guests there, I don't stand here. I go somewhere else where there are guests. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I have a totally spontaneous question. Could you tell me a story about the figurehead on the HMS Surprise?
Oh, that's a long story. That is a long story. I did some research about that. You ever heard of, you want to hear straight from the horse's mouth? You've heard that saying? You heard straight from the horse's mouth? When it comes to the figurehead on the Surprise, I found the horse's mouth. And he said, unfortunately, it's not Athena, it's not Boudica, it's not anybody in particular. It was an amalgamation of Britannia and Diana the Huntress, but it's not meant to be anybody in particular.
Who's the horse?
Gordon Lacko.
Oh.
Now, Gordon Lacko was on the, he presented himself as on the design team for the figurehead for the movie Master and Commander Far Side of the World. I, through later conversations with him, found out that he was actually the senior technical advisor for that movie. So that's the horse's mouth.
On the subject of accoutrements, I think the most important one would be a working smartphone. If a guest has a medical emergency, if there is a discipline problem, if somebody is grossly misbehaving, we should all have the museum security number in our phones. If any of these things are happening, if a guest has a medical problem, call security immediately. Stay with the guest, tell them where you are, security will respond. Also, if you have a guest who doesn't speak the English language, you can use your smartphone to interact with them in their language, as we have discussed in the previous class. Also, if you have, if your answer to, the answer to one of their questions is, I'm sorry, I don't know that, if time allows, the docent manual is on the website, on the docent website, which you can access from your phone. It's all there on your phone. So having a smartphone is a really important thing.
Thank you, David.
We're running out of time.
Just a couple more slides, I promise. This won't take long. I've got a couple more things here. First of all, there's a quote from Mary Fipps. Now, she's my wife. She happens to be sitting in the back of the room today. She came here to watch me make a fool of myself or to watch how everybody interacts with me. But she came up with a quote one day as I was heading out the door to come down here to the Maritime Museum. If you want to send me an email, maybe you want a copy of the pocket specs. This is my email address. Jot it down real quick. You got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Finally, the joke of the day.
Oh, no.
Better say that. Thank you. That's it.
The bottom line is, you got all these resources around you. They all bring stories to tell. Use everyone and practice deck watches. All you have to do is show up, find somebody in a blue shirt, say, you mind if I hang out for a while and see what you do and how you do it? And everyone will say, sure, why not? Okay, we had a special thing come up with, you know.
Real quick, if you're gonna be a docent tomorrow on the Western Flyer, there's a practice at 1 o'clock, training at 1 o'clock.
And we have the executive director waiting to come on up here and talk to you.
So we have a special event for us. As the executive director for the Western Flyer has come to tell you what the agenda is for them.
My name is Sherry Plummerfelt, and as you said, I'm the executive director of the Western Flyer Foundation, so thanks so much, all of you. Has everybody heard of the Western Flyer story? Yes. Yes, have you read these docent guides that went out, I heard?
Yes.
You guys did your homework. That was actually created for us by a docent, and those were some great information there, so thank you so much. I'm wondering how many people here have signed up to be docents for tomorrow? Okay, we have, so quite a few. How many is that? 1, we need quite a few. What we've been doing tours. We left Monterey just over a week ago, and each spot is a little bit different. So we were in Monterey, and then we were in Santa Barbara, and Long Beach, and Newport, and here. And every time it's different. And so if we have big lines of people, we have to really move people through the boat kind of quickly. So I think ideally, initially we thought, oh, it'll be great. We'll have Docent Station telling the whole story. We had to throw that down the toilet in a way because people were getting jam-logged and people were in line getting frustrated because they weren't getting on the boat. So we've come up with a new system, kind of depending on the line. Like if there's a lineup of people, we really try to move people through the boat in about 20 minutes. And so there's docents that we need who are maybe talking to people in line, giving them a little bit of the story. We have docents that we need that are helping sign people up because we have to have a waiver. Our insurance agent requires it. There are docents helping people on and off the boat safely. And then we have a few that are stationed in different parts of the boat. Because one of the things that we found is that people think we're a museum, so they were crawling into our bunks and one of our crew members found his journal open. Oh. Yeah, so we are very strategically positioning docents to say, people are living on this boat. These are crew quarters, yeah, please do not go in here. So the bottom line is, and the timing is from 10 until around 4:30, so that's a long day. So we actually need quite a few docents. So
How many more can I get for tomorrow?
I didn't sell it well enough. It's so much fun.
That's a good question. Do you have to be a docent finished your class here before you can do that tomorrow?
Well, you know what? If you're just doing merchandising or on and off the boat, you do not have to be a blue shirt yet. Past that.
You
I've already got Trent.
Yeah, because we'll have crew on the boat as well they know the story and can answer questions. So really, we just need people to help guide the traffic and maybe not let people rifle through our journals. So yeah, okay, so we have a couple more. And hopefully all of you will get a chance to come and see the Western Flyer. What else would you like me to share with this group? Do you have questions about the Western Flyer?
How long are you here for?
Yeah. We're here until we leave bright and early Thursday. One day. We're on our way. This is has anybody read the log from the Sea of Cortez?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that was that's what made the Western Flyer famous, was back in 1940. Author John Steinbeck and his best friend, marine biologist Ed Ricketts, took the Western Flyer on a 6-week expedition to Mexico's Gulf of California and came back and published, the log from the Sea of Cortez, which many people have read. And we are going back for the 85th anniversary reunion. It hasn't been back in 85 years, and that's where we're headed. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah.
The lecture tomorrow will be here at 5:30, is that correct?
Yes, is that what time?
Members night. Yep.
Yeah.
Here, this deck at 5:30.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Pardon? Yes. Yeah.
There's a membership meeting
Members night.
tomorrow, 5:30 till 9. Presentation will be on the Western Flyer.
Oh, no, the presentation will be in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
About.
Steve Thompson presentation will be on the Western Flyer. Okay, so be here tomorrow. There was one question.
What's your next port of call?
Ensenada.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. We're running out of time, folks.
Gonna ask who's all on board.
Who's on board? We're calling them our core 4. So we have 4 crew members and then a constant flow. So I am leaving after San Diego and then flying to La Paz. And there's scientists coming on and off and different people, but we have 2 captains, a cook, and a marine tech on board as the core 4. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll see you tomorrow night, I hope, or see some of you.
About on the Berkeley schedule for now, and at 1 o'clock, you're available for.
Yeah, so anybody who wants the docent tour to go through, and we'll show you, how it's going to meet us there at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Down there.
Down on the Western Flyer.